Hey guys, so I wanted to talk about Anthropic's announcement that it would be watermarking text. And this is a pretty important issue to me because I've always been concerned about disclosure requirements when it comes to AI. It kind of puts anyone using AI on their back foot in terms of different treatment than, say, other types of mediums. So, for example, when it comes to AI generated, let's say AI generated video, there are laws out there that if you create an AI generated image of a candidate running for office, that you could be required to include a disclaimer on it, like a warning label. Now, some people might think, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, and we have disclosures in all these other areas. But the problem is, disclosures require a person to speak when they otherwise wouldn't speak. It's compelled speech when the government tells you you have to. And there are often criminal penalties involved or even hefty civil penalties. Maybe you don't care. Honestly, there are a lot of people out there that aren't creating political content that could care less. And maybe even they see it as, you know what? I don't like politics. I think it's too divisive. So I'm glad that they're removing people creating AI generated stuff about politicians. Now, the problem with that is a First Amendment problem. We in this country protect minority speech, unpopular speech, speech that's offensive, speech that people simply don't like. And one type of speech is political speech, whether you're using a political cartoon or, say, AI generated videos. Now, this brings me to Claude's announcement a couple of days ago. I mean, we're looking at 3 days ago for this announcement, which puts us at Friday, and then an earlier announcement last week that they were going to be doing text watermarking. Now, how this works is technical, but as I understand it, and as this article explains, they are using word patterning to identify close matches to how Claude predicts its own text. So let's look here at the summary. So they use a method for watermarking that does not have any practical impact on the quality or content of Claude's outputs. Might get to that. The difference between watermarked and unwatermarked text will not be distinguishable to readers. So the example that they use down here is, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, not too far. So the example they use, take this sentence: the weather today was cold, and the word is very unlikely to be sugary. You know, someone's not going to say the weather today was cold and sugary. That doesn't make any sense, but it's quite likely that it could choose overcast or gray to describe the weather. So their point here is that under most circumstances, it doesn't matter much to the reader which of these two latter words the model ultimately chooses. The meaning of the sentence is largely the same either way. I take reservation to that because even if the meanings are the same, the choice is driven not by style, not like a writer developing their own writing style, like I kind of hope that I think of AI as this text generator doing, but doing word choice for a completely unrelated reason. And that reason is so that their text, it can be evidence that their AI model was used. There's going to be a lot of people Again, I always talk about some of the more contentious topics when it comes to AI. I mean, these days, almost every topic seems contentious, but people are really worried about AI use in all sorts of areas. I talked earlier, of course, about AI generated videos, but AI generated text, people want to know when it's used. So there's this authorship problem and an attribution problem. I want to be very clear. Anthropic can absolutely make Claude watermark its text. They're a private company. If they want to track how their AI is used in this manner, have at it. I think normatively speaking, or at least how this is going to shape AI going forward, it's going to have a real negative effect on people wanting to use it to develop their own voice or to lower communication barriers that they have. And that could be as simple as not being a native speaker of English and wanting to use Claude to improve your syntax and your diction. Beyond that, some people use it to help them think. There are certainly downsides to offloading all of your thinking to AI, but exploring ways of organizing or structuring your thought can be an interim measure, could be temporary, to getting you to be a better thinker. And maybe you go through a process where at first you're relying heavily on Claude for everything from drafting to editing. And maybe you realize you reach a point that you want to take more ownership. I think Claude or Anthropic might say, yeah, sure, great. You could do all of those things. But when you use our system, we want to know if you're publishing text, we want to give other people the opportunity to see what was generated by our system versus you. There's some very close similarities to using AI as an editor to using a human editor. So, in the writing process, people may talk to friends, they may have a mentor, they may have can afford an editor that provides heavy feedback or light editing or idea generating conversations. All of those things can happen without attribution. Now, can they say thank you to my editor at the beginning in an acknowledgement section? Sure, but it's not required. It's not like you're going to be dinged ethically or professionally for relying on those sources. But when it comes to AI, if you're using it for that purpose, watermarking sure seems like we're moving closer to identifying people using it that method versus the traditional method. I take reservation to that use of provenance to separate or differentiate AI assisted writing where an editor is out of reach. There's this profession protective aspect to it that kind of irks me a little bit. I mean, we're all experiencing the effects of AI in some degree or another. But as a tool that can lower the communication barrier, it really bothers me that we are now moving away from its general use without stigma to a place where maybe we'll have tiered classes of writing of individuals that that really hasn't existed before. And so I want to fight back against that. I hope we do come up with some social norms about AI use and that we're not trapped so much in this thought that AI use is bad or that we need to cater to a particular opinion about it when it comes to government regulation, because that's where we're going to run into constitutional problems. So let me go through the other bullet points here. So nothing is added to the text and there are no hidden characters. Right. So again, it's this word patterning that they use to identify Claude generated speak. So large language models like Claude work by generating one word at a time. Each time the model decides the next word, it chooses among a list of potential candidates, ultimately selecting the most sensible one or likely based on the preceding text. So you can already see they are using this predictive word patterning to identify those patterns and match them to their own system. Um, Word watermarking uses low stakes choices like these, which occur many times over a piece of generated text to leave a pattern in Claude's responses. That pattern is undetectable to the reader, but it's detectable to anyone who has a key that encodes it. So, yes, right. This seems not deceptive on Anthropic's part, but saying that it's undetectable to the reader at the time that they're reading assumes that they wouldn't also have access to a potential key that allows them to see what Anthropic or Claude thinks is AI generated speech. So when watermarking is used, choices are still made at random, but the source of the randomness is different. And here they're actually talking about how they randomly generated words before, but now they're randomly generating them in a slightly different way. Instead of using arbitrary random number, uh, using an arbitrary random number generator to pick the next word, watermarking uses the key and a few words that come before it to settle which word the model should pick. That is, the words that Claude picks are still random, but now one can check the sequence of the words to see if it's consistent with the words Claude would make if it was using the key. If it is, one can assign a probability that the text was generated by Claude. So it's not even, guaranteeing that Claude generated this text. It's just matching the similarity in the patterns. You know, there's systems out right now like Pentagram that use a slightly different system, and I think they even mention it here. Yeah, so Pentagram is the software system that Substack uses to try to detect AI generated speech on their platform. And this uses a different method because companies that provide it don't have Anthropic's key. Among other things, the services look at aspects like of the text, like the subtle and not so subtle tells that often appear in phrasing. For example, AI models appear to be fond of this construction. This isn't X, it's Y. And that is very common. I still see it today. And every time I see it, I think of AI generated speech. The word quietly is a good one. There's several others, in fact, and people are always making lists and posting them on X. One word for me is delve. So let's delve into this topic. Apparently, that's a regional use in some locations, and many AI systems were trained on that regional data set, and it just comes up more often than it normally has across all English speaking countries or areas. Funny enough. So it's picking up different patterns than the watermark. The watermark is very much keyed to how it's generating the speech itself. So there's been a lot of discussion about whether this actually changes what words the system is going to choose. So, for example, if the weather today was cold and this AI system had predictive patterning to choose gray, then it will consistently choose gray when it has these preceding words. but maybe, there was slight differences that would not cause grade to be chosen every time, but overcast to be chosen sometime, and that itself would have the mark of predictive patterning. So instead of the weather today was cold, maybe the weather today was gloomy and overcast. And so you're still going to have variations, but the as they said before, the pattern of randomness is going to be key to this watermarking feature. I think people are concerned about how much that's going to change speech. And I said before, they said this will not have any practical impact on the quality or content of Claude's outputs. And I'll take them at their word. They cite studies from 20 what 2023. When was this paper? This is a well, maybe yeah, okay. So this paper was published 2 years ago, and this was the basis for their system. Was This was produced by Google DeepSeek, and this was the theory that they went with, and very similar to how I described. But in any event, they're they're using this system, and the system is showing that it's not going to have much effect on any perceivable choice among similar words. And so watermarking doesn't require any extra tokens and will not be more expensive. Okay, great. Watermarking carries no identifying information and can't be traced to a specific person, organization, or chat. Got it. They're just going to be able to identify when, as evidence that Claude or any other AI system that they use, or that they design, was used. So here, um, it will be quite obvious if you are the author of a work and they scan it. Someone has the key and scans it, and they discover words or sentences or even paragraphs that match how Claude would generate that text. So, and here all they're saying is that the watermarking won't be specific to Claude. So as of August 2nd, the EU requires AI providers serving its market to mark AI generated content. Um, and in fact, several big AI companies, along with Anthropic, have also signed on. And that includes OpenAI, Google, Meta, but not XAI. So Elon Musk hasn't jumped on board. But all these other ones, which could make watermarking ubiquitous, practically speaking, among all AI companies, which would be awful. Again, the idea that we're going to have fuel to the fire for witch hunts about AI use is not going to make this product very fun. And I think they're really shooting themselves in the foot having this system in place. So that's, what I've been thinking about this week. There are obviously going to be lots of opinions on this topic. There may be popular opinion might say, you know what? I want to know when AI is used. And that's great. You're going to have Claude providing a partial answer to that you can check and see whether some parts or all of it matches how Claude generates its text. And then you're going to have other companies doing the same thing. So maybe you have several keys from different AI companies that will allow you to figure out which AI system was used, or if not definitively, have a guess as to which one generated the text, because they're all going to be different depending on how they're designed and the data set, and various other factors that play into their word prediction system. So that's all I have today. I hope this was useful. It's always a pleasure to talk about AI. A little bit of free speech here. Again, I'm not concerned because no government regulation involved, just from the free speech perspective, but more concerned about the culture around AI. So that's all I have today. Have a great one. Talk to you later.